To understand the design story of the Littorio-class, you have to step back into the naval chess match of the early 1930s, a game shaped not by open warfare but by treaties, rivalries, and the weight limits imposed on the world's capital ships. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 had frozen battleship construction among the major naval powers, capping new ships at 35,000-ton standard displacement and guns no larger than 16 inches. Italy signed the treaty, but for years its government did not seriously commit to building new battleships under its terms. The Italian Regia Marina, proud yet financially constrained, remained cautious. On the other side of the Mediterranean, France held the same allotment as Italy under the treaty, 2 modern capital ships of 35,000 tons each. But Paris did not use this allowance until 1932. When France finally decided to act, it acted decisively. The Dunkirk and Strasbourg were unlike any battleships afloat at the time. They were built specifically to counter Germany's so-called pocket battleships, the Deutschland-class, with their heavy guns and radar rolls. The 2 French ships carried 8 330mm guns forward in quadruple turrets, were fast, and were armored heavily against the threat of long-range gunnery and commerce-raiding duels. They were purpose-built, fresh, and modern. And when France laid down Dunkirk in 1932, something shifted across Europe. The Regia Marina had no answer to the Dunkirks. Its existing battleships were aging, slow, and obsolete, even after refits. The Navy needed a modern capital ship, not in theory, not in distant planning documents, but now. At the same moment, France's action also stirred Germany, which had been slowly loosening itself from the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles. The laying down of the Dunkirks helped prompt Germany to pursue the Sternhorst-class. And for Italy, the French ships served as a catalyst for what would become the most powerful battleships Italy would ever build, the Littorio-class. Not a simple copy of foreign concepts. The Littorio-class became a statement of modern Italian naval engineering. They embraced the treaty limits nominally, but in reality, Italy, like many other nations, treated the 35,000-ton figure as a diplomatic fiction. The design teams knew they would exceed it, and they designed accordingly. The backbone of the ship was its offensive power, 9 381mm, 15-inch, guns in 3 triple turrets, 2 forward and 1 aft. These guns were not only larger than those of the Dunkirk class, they were true battleship weapons, capable of engaging any adversary Italy might face in the Mediterranean. Italian designers had long experience with large-caliber artillery, but the 381mm 50 Modello 1934 gun was a new design, intended for high muzzle velocity and long range. The high velocity gave it excellent penetration at shorter distances, though it also resulted in high barrel wear and dispersion issues that would plague the class. On paper, their firepower was formidable. But firepower alone did not define the Littorios. Perhaps the most distinctive aspect of their design was their armor protection system, specifically the Pugliese underwater defense system. Engineer Umberto Pugliese had developed a unique method of protecting ships from torpedoes and underwater blasts. Instead of the usual lead bulkhead seen in American or British designs, Pugliese proposed a large, cylindrical air-filled chamber running longitudinally along the hull inside the armor belt. The idea was simple in principle: a torpedo detonation would crush the outer hull and collapse the cylinder, absorbing and dissipating the shock before it could reach vital spaces. Italy embraced the system fully, integrating it into the internal structure of the Littorios. It was innovative, even radical. The entire underwater protection scheme depended on these massive cylinders and the concentric crumple zones around them. On the drawing board, the system promised exceptional resistance to torpedoes. In practice, the design revealed weaknesses, particularly when hit by modern, high-charge warheads. But when the Littorios were built, the Pugliese system was one of the most advanced underwater defenses in the world, distinctly Italian in its conception, bold in its ambition. Above the waterline, the armor layout followed a more traditional approach. The main belt was thick, sloped, and carefully integrated into the hull structure. The deck armor was substantial, a necessity given the threat of plunging fire at long range and aerial bombs from the rapidly growing air forces around the Mediterranean. The citadel was compact but heavily protected, focusing defenses where they mattered most. One of the clever aspects of the Littorio class was the way Italy sought to balance offensive striking power with high speed. The Regia Marina had long valued speed in its capital ships, partly due to the nature of combat in the Mediterranean, shorter engagement ranges, sudden encounters, and the need to respond quickly to threats. To achieve the desired speed of around 30 knots, the Littorios required a powerful propulsion system for sets of geared steam turbines and 8 large boilers. These produced an impressive amount of power, making the ships some of the fastest treaty-era battleships built. Despite their massive engines, the Littorios maintained a relatively fine hull form, optimized for high-speed running in the calm and confined waters of the Mediterranean. Their long, sleek lines were not just aesthetically pleasing, they were hydrodynamically efficient. The Italian emphasis on speed was not purely theoretical, speed was intended as a tactical weapon. Another hallmark of the Littorio design was the secondary battery arrangement. Italian naval planners believed strongly in the importance of heavy intermediate caliber guns for engaging destroyers, torpedo boats, and even light cruisers. As a result, the Littorios carried 12 152mm, 6-inch guns in 4 triple turrets. But unlike many contemporaries, Italy placed 2 turrets on each side, creating a broadside-heavy arrangement rather than center-line positioning. This reflected the expectation of fighting at moderate ranges with rapidly maneuvering opponents. For anti-aircraft beyond the weaponry and armor, the Littorio class was a triumph of Italian naval aesthetics. The towering forward superstructure, the clean lines of the hull, the flared bow, and the balanced arrangement of the turrets gave the ships a distinctive and commanding appearance. Italian designers cared deeply about symmetry, proportion, and the visual presence of a warship, and the Littorios reflected that philosophy. They were modern but elegant, imposing yet refined. A look at their internal layout reveals the careful thought put into balancing war-fighting capabilities with crew efficiency. The ships had an advanced command and control setup for their time, with modern fire control systems that benefited from Italy's strong optical and range-finding traditions. The Regia Marina's gunnery schools and fire control engineers had long been respected internationally, and the Littorios were equipped with sophisticated gunnery directors, stereoscopic rangefinders, and early radar sets once Italy integrated radar into its fleet. The internal subdivision of the ship was tight and efficient. Compartments were arranged with damage control in mind, with redundant pumping systems and electrical distribution to maintain power under damage. Engine rooms and boiler rooms were staggered to minimize the risk of a single hit disabling the entire propulsion system. The design process itself went through several iterations. Early sketches considered smaller ships, closer in size to the Dunkirk class, and even flirted with unusual configurations of turret placement. But once Italy understood that France's next battleships, the Richelieu-class, would mount 15-inch guns in 2 quadruple turrets forward, the decision was made to escalate. Italy wanted a true equal. The Littorios would not simply counter the Dunkirks, they would surpass them. So the design grew, and so did the ambitions. The official displacement figures claimed treaty compliance, but the ships exceeded the limit by several thousand tons even before they were launched. Italy was far from the only nation stretching the definition of 35,000 tons, but the Littorios represent one of the clearest examples of treaty displacement being treated as a polite fiction. Naval competition was resuming, and every major navy was designing ships that were more powerful than the treaty intended. The final design, the one that would become Littorio, Vittorio Veneto, and later Roma and the unfinished Impero, was an embodiment of Italian naval philosophy in the 1930s: fast, beautiful, heavily armed, and ambitious, with innovative systems that pushed the edges of what was practical. They were ships built not only to match rivals but to assert a place in the hierarchy of global naval power. The Littorios were meant to stand shoulder to shoulder with the great battleships of the world, and Italy poured its engineering skill into making that ambition a reality. The story of the Littorio-class is ultimately a story of the Mediterranean naval race in the interwar years, of the consequences of the Dunkirk-class, of Italian pride, and of bold naval engineering choices. They were answers to strategic questions posed by France and Germany, shaped by treaty-era compromises and national ambitions. And whatever one thinks of their later wartime careers, their design remains one of the most fascinating and distinctive expressions of battleship engineering in the 20th century. From the gun decks to the bridge, every story we tell honors those who served. If this tale made you feel the salt and steel of history, give it a like, and if you're not yet part of our channel's convoy, subscribe and join the ranks. More powerful stories await.